Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Conversations with Keandra. We have such a great topic that we're going to be discussing today, and it's the impact of COVID-19 on teachers and students. And this will be told from a teacher's perspective. So guys, the other two amazing guests you're looking at right now are educators. They are teachers, and we're going to get some just real-time perspective from just what COVID-19 has been like for educators, for teachers. So we'll start off and introduce our amazing hosts, one that you probably have already recognized, but we're going to go around the room.
Jasmine. I teach high school, and I've been teaching for 6 years.
Hi, everybody. My name is Candace. I teach middle school, and I've been teaching for maybe about 4 years.
We got some length there. So we got 4 and 6 years. So y'all, we have experience in the room, okay? I love it. I love it. As we know, this pandemic has just taken a toll on everybody. Everyone. This pandemic, started back in 2019, technically, 2020, mostly here in the US when, was labeled a global pandemic, and it shut down everything. Universities, graduations, all those things got shut down, work experiences. So we went from working in person to working virtually, or not working at all, and just experiencing like a really large economic crisis. And we just saw a lot of the disparities in many communities. The education experience, like learning as a whole, everything just it changed. It's just been a different experience. It's taken a toll, especially on the younger generations. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Is just I want to dive right in and just hear you all's perspective. Like, how has COVID-19 impacted education as a whole?
COVID has created a new perspective for teachers. I think it's given them a multitude of chances to advance their methods in teaching. I think that's important. It has created a little bit more rigor. That's a word that we toss around a little bit in lessons, and it's also caused us to become a little bit more sensitive to students' needs and to venture away from standards, right? That might be aligned to topics. And actually, it probably helped us become a lot more patient, because there was a need for that back when the pandemic hit. So I think that those are just a couple of things that I've noticed once we fell into this crisis. And there are actually a couple of practices that we continue to use throughout our teaching, even in 2021.
Jazz, that was such a great perspective that you brought. Like, can you elaborate just even a small bit on just the standards that you mentioned? Like, what have been those differences with standards? Is that like standardized testing? Like, what specifically with standards?
Standardized testing for sure. So we had here in Florida a push for no testing, and that happened for a year. Actually, it might have happened for up to 2 years. So right now, the district is working on shifting out testing as a whole for end of year exams for students. And I assume that might be because of what we've dealt with in the pandemic. But that's something different. Definitely a change for Florida. We haven't seen anything like that since the early 2000s. So we'll see how it works. But that's definitely the biggest one right now, the one that's being spoken about the most. That definitely will impact again, those Florida standards. So how we teach or what we teach when it comes to the week, the day, the month, the semester. If you don't have standards, then you kind of have a little bit of freedom. I would say sometimes educators might argue that having standards or aligning lessons to a standard means that you are teaching it as it should be. But again, that's specific to an exam, and a lot of people are on the fence about that sort of thing. So I'm thinking that without that big push at the end of the school year, you do have a lot. You can venture into many different avenues and disciplines within your topic. So I think that's really important, because it does give educators a big chance to come to terms with what they've been teaching for years, and I mean over a decade, and maybe put a twist on some of their topics. like I've been able to do because I teach out of accountability, which just means that I don't teach a class that has to test at the end of the school year.
That's huge, for Florida or just any other states, if they've kind of been experiencing similar things where, getting out of standardized testing, we can look at that from like early education that, some of you guys are in to, the university level. Like it's, wow, just hearing that change and shift for education, that's incredible. Or it's a really great thing that's happening. How about for you, Candace? Like how has COVID-19 impacted? How do you feel COVID-19 has impacted education as a whole?
With
Uh-huh.
Jazz, that it's pushed us more into like technological advancements, which
Mm,
means for teachers, we kind of had to roll with the punches, but it's a pros and cons to that. So the pro is that, we gained more hard skills. I know it's for me, I started using OneNote and just using all these
mm,
cool gadgets to make sure my kids are digitally engaged.
mhm.
But it presents more of a challenge, like roll with the punches, but am I allowed to say ouch?
Right.
So especially when it comes to teaching both digitally and to those
Mhm.
students who are in class. You're worried about spacing, you're worried about COVID precautions and if they're effectively taken.
Mhm.
So they started out, 6 feet, then it went to okay, 3 feet. And before you know it, we're back to like full classrooms now.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but the positive is that it did basically expand our horizon with
Mm,
exploring how education can be effective digitally. And like
right.
Jazz said, we did become more aware that our students are humans, right? Like us. However, on the flip side, I would have loved to see that equal equivalent urgency to meet the mental needs of teachers. So we're all concerned about our students and which is great. We should be concerned about our students and their basically empathize with what they're going through. But as well, it's like, okay, well, who's concerned about the teachers who are teaching the students? So if I don't have anything to pour out because I'm so drained, overexerted, because I'm just pulling my mind in 10 different ways of how to engage them, and then it becomes, okay, well, what do I have to pour out to them that's fruitful and effective? So
Wow.
they're both sides of it. But it was definitely purposeful.
Tonight we're going to focus on both sides of COVID-19 and just the impacts that it's had. And I love many of those points. Think about, especially in like the early stages of COVID-19, where Candace, you kind of brought this up of you had some students that, they either their parents preferred them to be taught virtually, or you have parents that wanted their students in person. What
Right.
has that been like? How has COVID-19, have you guys seen improvement academically or not with student attendance? What factors have that placed on students?
Student attendance. So I remember when COVID first started, we were all getting adjusted to this new way of life. So it was literally, we had about a day, we had a meeting, and then we had a day to create these teams, create these Zoom meetings and everything. So, we're giving each other room and leeway for adjustment. But after that point, it then becomes a question of, okay, where do the parents fall in place in this? How are we going to hold the parents accountable? Because it's no longer, okay, I don't have the student physically in front of me. I can't, you know, create some positive reinforcements
Mm,
physically. So now is we're expecting the parents. And I think what parents got a chance to see, okay, this is how my child really acts. I have to
mm,
deal with my child. It really takes that extra push, for some students.
right.
And some students won't show up to Zoom meetings. So which means if you're not here, how are you going to learn? So teachers can do all that we can call parents, but if the child doesn't show up, it's like, what can we do? So that's how it was at the very start. But as parents become, well, hopefully they're being held to a higher standard.
Mhm.
Um, as far as accountability, it then becomes, okay, well, this is your child and if you don't want them to fail because you're not ensuring that they're showing up to class, then you need to kind of step up. It does put an extra strain on parents. However, before COVID, as far as parental accountability, it was not existed, it seemed, in some cases. I won't say across the board, but a lot of the pressures are placed on teachers and data and results. And, it's like, okay, well, where does, parental advisory come into play?
And pivoting a little bit, like I'm curious, like what has been the response of your administration at each prospective school and ensuring the safety and well-being of both the students and the teachers?
They've been strongly aligned with what the local government has outlined. Now, you do have, of course, the differences in principles and their political beliefs, because really comes down to politics, honestly, is that in certain districts, there is, of course, that pushback, with the mask mandates in school. But there has been some support with others. So at least in my perspective, students were coming back on campus physically October 5th, 2020, exactly. Which again worked out, the physical distancing, like Candace said earlier, it worked the 6 feet, right? There were markers, in the hallways, to, guide students on which side of the hallway they should be in. And of course, limited capacity when it came to physical students. So majority of them were virtual. And so I guess I would say the support system from administration for educators, at least, it was very very one track, and again in line with what those in the community wanted. So that meant that we were to teach in what we call a dual modality, meaning that you are teaching online on Zoom and with your students in class physically. There's a little bit of a spat about that, only because some teachers felt that they the support from the administration was lost on them due to needing to meet two needs at once. So students that are in the classroom versus on Zoom. And as Candace has already said, you do have an issue where some students may or may not show up. In the high school level, you have a lot of mischievous ones, which is fine. That's always fun, but where there are excuses. And those excuses are actually supported by parents. Things like he or she does not have a device, the Wi-Fi is shoddy, or they just simply didn't get on today because we had to babysit. So that also became, a really big issue in that I don't think the administrations realized that students in upper levels, upper grades, that they were now accountable for their younger siblings in order for them to hop on Zoom and to complete the quizzes and learn the technology as well. And that was a major issue. So you saw that completely ignored by administrations. They acknowledged the fact that there was maybe like a support, right, mental support for our kids. So there was a lot of access to our counselors during that period where we were all stuck at home. And even into now, right, into the classrooms where we are physically. But I do think that they missed the mark when it came to recognizing that some families aggregate together in one home to fulfill academic duties together, whether it's from preschool, nursery, all the way up to college level, whatever it is. So you would oftentimes see that students are not where they need to be, or they are simply providing an excuse, which you cannot argue with. Hey, I had to do homework with sibling number 3, he doesn't know how to log into Zoom. He doesn't know how to use Edgenuity and whatever new software that they had us on. So the support in that sense, like, hey, here's your preparation, your training in order to hop on to Zoom come that next Monday, right, March 16, 2020, to teach, non-existent. And again, I understand that there's something that was backed by the districts, that was backed by the local government. None of us could help that, but you did see a lot of confusion that first Monday into the rest of the school year, right, into the rest of June. And I'm thinking that if administration had been very much more direct, or at least had like a lifeline, from these teachers to their department heads or whatever, distinctive person it is, that maybe we would have kind of cleaned up sooner than we did. Okay. And I'm talking about attendance. I'm talking about performance gains. I'm talking about even class, participation, basic things like that, including parent support. But that would have been nice. That would have been nice. A little bit of support.
Like just a lot of different ways that COVID has impacted, and just kind of thinking about, has the support really been there? It looks like it could be dependent upon the school, the area. But I'm curious about what you guys' thoughts are with this when we hear about just a lot of the COVID-19 outbreaks where you have teachers that, are sent home. They have to leave, or because, every week there's a COVID case, and, the entire classroom has to go in isolation, or you're teaching from home. Like, what has that been like? Do you feel that the support has been there administratively in handling situations like that, or even like the mental health toll, specifically on students that may have brought COVID home to their family, and that's something that they're struggling with. Do you feel that the support has been there in that aspect?
When it came to COVID cases or outbreaks, or even students who might have been dealing with COVID in their homes while we were out of the building. So that's March 16, 2020, all the way until September 2020. There was a very perfunctory mannerism about it, very by the book, where you would simply be told through email to accommodate a student because they're having whatever, happening at home, and to ensure that you pass that student. That was the rule. Okay. And I think in some cases that may still be a rule. It was a little bit of a golden rule because it, of course, it gives, that student a chance to focus on life, which of course was happening to everybody. And I do like that because, I knew a student personally, who happened to be a student of mine for a very long time. And I was more than happy to help her out in that sense. But, in those moments, I will say that administration did provide support for the student. After a while, they recognized that there was also a need for, for mental wellness with students, and that is a real thing. Again, it's very new, I believe, to education, to even acknowledge that a student may need a particular style, right, of mental wellness, right, in their life, whether it be from, brain breaks, right, fun activities in between classes, or whether it's like, hey, Miss Davis, I need you to give me an extension on this work. I'm gonna take a day or two, things are happening, and that's that. But I like that they did do that, not to prevent accountability, placed on that student, but to allow them to, get their own bearings with the pandemic and to deal with it in their ways. I did see something really nice that happened at my school, and I wasn't expecting it. I like that they use social media to communicate with students, and they were able to broadcast, office hours or new office hours for the counselors, that way for our students. Or they would do little activities like, hey, how are you feeling today, right? Use the emoji, right? The smiley face or the black heart to represent, maybe feelings of sorrow, a little bit of downness, whatever, they use. And that was a way to gauge really quickly about how students are feeling for the day. And I thought that was really fun, a really neat way to kind of engage and get in touch with students, even if they don't want to, have full-fledged conversations. It became a lot more personable. And, sometimes with lower grades, Candace, I'm sure you can attest to this, you become a mom, right, or a parent to them in some sense. So I really like that there was that touch, that came to students, even though we weren't physically together. We couldn't see each other. There, I couldn't hear voices at some point, until Zoom became a big thing. And again, back in March 16, 2020, Zoom was not a thing. We were still trying to figure out what that was and how to even use it. So I really, really like that there was some form of connectivity between students and, counselors and teachers and, administration. I really thought that was sweet.
I'm curious, Candace, what was that experience like for you, or even other colleagues of yours or teachers at other institutions? Was that support there? Do you feel that you were supported by your administration, and or even, the support there for your students?
I definitely think that there was support for the students. So for one, as soon as COVID hit, all students were given devices, right? And they were able to check out devices the next day or that next Monday, whatever the case was. So to ensure that, okay, each child, they'll be able to access the work online. As Jasmine was saying, we did mental check-ins with our students. So our trust counselor, she gave us a few strategies to use, at the start of COVID, just to do mental check-in with students. And it does become a lot more personable. I did like the flexibility of it. But as you said, I know at my school we experienced a lot of quarantines. So literally for 2 weeks, maybe I'll be teaching. Then I'll notice, okay, I'll get an email, oh, this student is on quarantine. And then next thing you know, her class is on quarantine. So literally it's just like going with the flow, like constantly. So there was a bit of grace extended to us as teachers. Could there have been more? I think so. But again, the primary focus in this time is like, okay, we want our students to learn. We want them to have some sense of normality in the midst of this pandemic. So I do think the students' needs were extremely prioritized above everything else. So, and as Jasmine was saying, as far as administration with the COVID protocols, they follow suit with district, which follows suit with the state. So I do think that there should have been more of a push to prioritize the needs of teachers' mental health, right? So while our students, there were measures taken, do I think it's enough? No, because it's still overwhelming. So it's literally like, as Jazz was alluded to it, she mentioned the dual modality. It's like, okay, well, how effective can I be teaching in dual modality? For Jazz, it may look a little different because she's at the high school level, I'm at the middle school level. So they require, and I teach sixth grade of that, so they require a bit more attention than do the high school students. And also being aware, she was saying, like, there's probably I remember I had a parent and I had to call her, like, hey, is your child on? I'm noticing they're not on. What's going on? She's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. There are like 5 of us in the house and, the Wi-Fi is really acting up. So in those instances, okay, yes, I can empathize. And in other instances, oh, my child is asleep. Let me wake him up or wake her up. It's like, well, did you not know that we're in school? Like, and then it'll be lost upon them. Oh, your child is failing. Well, you kind of contributed to it by letting your child oversleep, or, I think all of those things happening simultaneously, it contribute to the learning loss, right? So in that first year, and then it's like, okay, well, what resources do we have as teachers to be provided with that mental health, right? Or, to just do those mental check-ins with us. We're doing mental check-ins with our student, but who's doing check-ins with us, right? So we need it just as much as them because it was an adjustment for everybody.
Absolutely.
For everyone. But again, the needs of the students were placed first. I think it should have been a bit more balanced in realizing that we as their teachers, we're pouring out into them, right? So if we're not there mentally, then how can we go into a class, go into a Zoom, go into the physical building and teach them, right? So when I say it was a lot of complications, and then let me tell you, quarantines is a whole nother topic. Quarantines, because it couldn't be effective because I literally had some students sitting in other classes. And it's like, oh, Miss Davis, what did you say? I can't hear you. I'm sitting in another class. I'm like, I don't understand.
Right.
So,
Wow.
It was literally a whirlwind.
I do like that there was even a little bit of support from those parents once they, got an idea as to, what it takes to be successful and to, build a student and move them on to their next grade level. I do like that there was an opportunity for parents to become teachers themselves. I really think that places, like you said, Candace, it helps place that accountability back on those parents because again, we lost touch with that. And in reality, back when, we're talking about older days, but parents were a lot more involved. So I think that now that they are aware of that, they're abreast of things, right? For example, we could directly communicate with them and give them updated, the real life data, right? Real life grades, things like that, and communicate with them. I really like that there is that connection now. So I will say, that is a form of support, right? That we did kind of get from our parents. Initially, I heard horror stories from my younger grades, but I heard that, parents were really like, oh, wait, correct my son, he did XYZ on the Zoom, right? And they'll butt in. But again, it was all in good, in good grace. Now, you didn't mention, was the administration, did they focus a little bit more on teachers? The answer is no. Definitely not. And again, it was about our students, which was no problem for us. Trust me, we were happy to, be home and be teaching. That was kind of cool. But I did notice, for example, with upper grade levels, how there might be those end of the year tests, right? Well, the really big ones, the ones that are, AP, right? IB, things like that, where they focus on college level courses. Those were the ones that were chosen to go on Zoom. And this was, again, March 16, 2020 to June. So the big push was to get those classes that correlated directly with students, admissions, things like that on Zoom, because they felt that teachers will be most effective on Zoom. So what I'm really telling you is that administration designed that. I don't know if it worked for every school, but they designed that so that the courses that still had to test would have a fighting chance. And I was one of them, and it was fun, of course, to see my students again, and they really gravitated towards hopping on Zoom and talking and interacting, because again, there's a life at school for them too. It really plays into what you did say about mental wellness for students. Well, part of that aspect being social for sure. And we all know that our students are most social at school. They spend the most time of their days there, and it's necessary. We just didn't realize that it was that necessary. We knew that. Parents had no clue, of course, but obviously they got to see the need for interaction at home. The hair being pulled out. Yeah, that was because they needed that interaction. They dual modalities, not easy, but it's still a way to interact. And it brings a little bit of normalcy back into that school day, even if it's hey, you on Zoom, let me take attendance, and let me take attendance for the other students physically. It may be extra work, but it's still an opportunity. So I won't knock it anymore.
An experience it has been, and I hate, I'm pushing, I'm, pushing for you guys that, that support, it gets there. The teachers have that same level of support that the students have received, that they're the same way that you guys are pouring into the students, others, administration, whoever it is pouring into you guys too, to make sure that you're supported, you feel safe, comfortable during this season. I wanted to share some statistics with you guys, some stats. So this is looking at August of this year, and just some of the impacts that it's had on children and emotional development. So this comes from KFF. It's the Kaiser Family Foundation. They're a bipartisan nonprofit, and they provide statistics on health issues. And I wanted to share some of these statistics with you guys, where we read that 42% of Black children in the US, parents said that they fell behind. 50% of Hispanic parents for children felt that their children fell behind academically during COVID-19. And 35% of that were white. 39% felt that their children fell behind academically. Okay, we see 30% said that their children fell behind in their social and emotional development. What is the impact of COVID-19 on this generation? The even younger 5-year-olds to middle school for you, Candace, and high school for you, Jazz. we're not talking about it now, but what impact is it having? Going from, living a life of in person, switching to virtual learning, and then coming back. And, some students may have even experienced death in their family. Like there's a lot of factors that I feel are impacting students. So, what toll is that having on them? We see that 29% said that their children experience mental health or some sort of behavioral problems. Okay, 27% felt that their students found it difficult to concentrate on their schoolwork and complete assignments. 11% talked about frequent headaches and stomach aches. And we even see that 15% had poor appetite or overeating. Like, just naming a few for you guys. Like, how do you feel from just the experiences of your students being in your classes, hearing those statistics? Like, what comes to mind hearing that? And did you see that? Like,
I definitely saw all of that. So from academic loss to the social awareness decline, to students experiencing death in their family. What was another one? Headaches, stomach aches, just not feeling well. So what I did when I first started going on Zoom, teaching on Zoom, like Jasmine said, I would give them mental breaks or just breaks from the screen. So okay, let's take a 5-minute break. And then also we had like our chat, like number communication going on. So okay, if they needed to use a bathroom, they'll put a number in the chat. If they just really need a break, so they'll put another number in the chat. So it forced us as teachers to really become aware that they need their basic needs met first before I can expect them to be a student, right? So if they're hungry, or if they had like a long night for some reason, if I know it was instances where I had students where their power was out. So it really, even though I'm like, oh gosh, this pushes my lesson back, it's like, okay, let me put a hold on this lesson and let's get in touch with them as a human first. Right. And so the downfall of that is that the academics does lag behind. So that's where you hear those statistics. Okay, there was a great learning loss. But again, it did push us, I would say in my perspective, to become more human with them, to empathize with them more. And then it gave them a chance to learn of me as a person, right? So I put my Bitmoji classroom, did, the basic fun facts about me as their teacher that they didn't know. So sometimes we had those like little personable conversations to really just check in with how they are doing. If they want to do like class updates, some kids, something about their pets. Did I fully, was I fully there for the
love
pets?
it.
No, but I let them talk about their pets for 30 seconds, if they want to share. Or just, and what it did, and I would say the positive of it in turn, it allowed them to make more like text to self connections. So I teach literacy, right? So I will always try to find a way to make a real life connection with them, even with the restriction of Zoom and not, being in person to person or doing dual modality, right? So yeah, I personally saw all those effects in my classroom, and it just puts you into the mind from, okay, like what's really important? Is it this test, or is it, them functioning as a capable human being in this society? And imparting these skills and this knowledge and wisdom in them. So I think both of those are equally important. But what has, taken precedence in the past, it is the test, right? So I think that is the positive of, what this pandemic has, unfortunately, with all of its detriments, there was some fruits out of it to gain, right? And to make us more connected and kind of give us that skin touch with our students. And now, was the transition easy coming back in school? No, it wasn't easy at all. Because it's like, now it's time to shift our brains a little bit. Okay, we're still concerned with them as humans, but let's get back on track with this testing. Let's get back on track with this academic progress, because you know that's what's fallen by the wayside.
But there was also a push from administration to slow down your day-to-day lesson style. So again, there's the routine, right? You get to hey, intro, right? Segue into whatever you needed to teach. Go ahead and give them a quick activity, maybe multiple choice, whatever it is, and let them do a worksheet or let them practice on it individually. So now there was, hey, you do know there are 7 other classes or 6 other classes that they need to go ahead and submit work for. We're going to ask you to simply go ahead and drop a document once a week, for them.
Right.
And all that sounds like heinous, it's like, oh, I'm no longer doing my job. Let me just drop a worksheet for them, back in March 2020. It was what kept them from falling over off the edge, because everything was overwhelming. The transition, the lack of social opportunities, social emotional learning was a struggle, of course, because now everyone's isolated, right? There was some emotion, like I give you with the example, right? The emojis, that was their chance to interact and share emotions, whereas in the past, all they had was, hey, Miss Davis, here's the email, here's my work, or hey, can you push back that deadline? And we're informal again through email. The thing with students is that they all need routines. We all need routines, even now as adults, and that's just how we all can function and contribute and fall in line and participate in the role that we're given, or the role that we accept. So with them having the routine back, having the expectation of the routine is exciting, right? They still have the first day jitters, and coming back into the classroom, like you said, there are some students who dealt with death, right? That we've had to excuse. There's some students who are still falling into quarantines now, which is fine. They know exactly what to do. Hey, I'm in quarantine. Here's my work still, or what did we do today? XYZ. And again, you get parents who tap right into it. So again, it's now a routine for parents to fall in line and to be more engaged, even if it's through, the texting app, Remind, or through email. And I really like that, because again, in the past, we didn't have that opportunity. So the transition was different, but students are ready to come.
What I love most importantly about this, when we talk about just like some of the impacts that it's had on students, I love, and just even going through the statistics, I love that, even though, you guys' role as educators, is like teaching them, but I love that you guys kind of took on, assume those other roles and positions, and like recognize that the students are human too. Like they have, they live lives outside of just coming to school. And, I think taking that time to give them mental health breaks, with everything going on, changing up the flow, using it as an opportunity to get to know your teacher more. Like I love a lot of just those different methods and techniques that you guys use. So, thank you guys for sharing that. And, just to name a few, what are some strategies that you guys have learned and that you would want another educator out there, that you think it might be useful for them in their classroom during this COVID season?
I think, this is something that we've already been doing, which is making parent contact. But I think being accountable for that parent contact, right? And being open and very transparent from day one about it is a winner. Definitely, especially during this time, because again, parents are aware of, the roles that they play in their child's success when it comes to school. So I think a big old push in that direction would be great. And I find that it does work. And even if you decide to, make contact strictly email, however it is, they are on it. And that, of course, gets the wheels going. So that means even if the student falls off due to a quarantine, a COVID situation in the house, whatever it is, death, whatever they have to do, they're out. The parents they're in the car and the kids on Zoom, and you see them riding in the front seat with the seatbelt on. And I'm just like, oh, we're doing it. Hey, mom, and that works, definitely works. So an open line of communication, again, something that we were already doing, but now is easier, now is more widely accepted, is definitely the way to go, definitely the way to go. I also like, and again, we call these best practices, right? So practices that are here to stay. Another one that we took from the pandemic, like you said, Candace, was a little check-in, whether it be a mental break, right? Or a, hey, y'all, tell me, you know, what happened over the weekend, current event, whatever it is. That sharing, that moment to where you get to where you have your students bonding and you get to bond with them, or at least hear them out or listen to their experiences, that is critical now. You know, again, even now, you know, because we don't talk about COVID as much in the classroom, you know, now that it's, you know, normalized, but there's still that need to connect, right, in a way that shows a little bit of compassion. So I think those are two that, you know, I've, you know, carried with me and have benefited my classroom. You know, students are a lot more willing to engage when they understand that you know, are still there to care or even lend, you know, an ear or a hand.
I would definitely say the same about, basically, in so many words, what I heard Jazz saying is show that you care, right? And show how much you care before you expect students to care, right? So
Ooh,
it's front
okay.
loading our investment into them before we can hand them the baton and say, okay, now you take this part of your education, right?
Mm.
So, and then definitely the open lines of communication. I know me personally, my communication actually skyrocketed
Wow.
when the pandemic hit. I was contacting parents, aunties, uncles, anybody
Mhm.
connected to the child. I was contacting the
Everybody.
counselors. I'm like, okay, listen, I haven't heard from this parent and I don't know how long. Can you please check on them? I need them to become invested in their child's education or just see what's going on at
Mm.
home. So I had an
Mm.
instance where nobody could get in contact with one of my students until maybe the very last month. And,
Mm.
you know, unfortunately, you know, their family had experienced a grave death, you know.
Mm.
So, and then it was amid like other, you know, issues that, you know, were out of my personal hands of control,
Mm.
right? So those things, just being aware of those check-ins and be willing to obviously have a system in place. Like, I'm all here for systems
Mm.
and routines. We all need them because let me tell you, when mine was broken, I'm like, okay, let me regroup. What am I to do now? So systems and routines are super important, but also I would encourage, you know, other teachers, other educators going into this field to be willing to be flexible with the style or approach, you
Mm.
know, and having that awareness. Okay, if I'm not getting the engagement that I'm expecting, okay, let me switch up some things, right? So maybe I do need to start with a poll. Okay, send me an emoji of how you're feeling. How was your weekend? Right? Or
Mhm.
like a fun wrap up session where they get to do a more engaging activity outside of reading. Right? So those strategies, and then what else? I would say for me, a corrective feedback helps. So when students get to see, especially because I'm literacy heavy, so my students do a lot of reading and writing. So for me to just quickly type a bit of advice or corrective feedback on their assignment, you know, it lets them know, okay, I'm actually checking and grading what you're working on. And I care about what you're writing. I care about what you're doing. And here's how we can make it better. So give the students room for growth and not, you know, expecting them to do everything correctly. Just extending that grace to them throughout the school year.
And students will not speak up about it, you know, initially. You kind of have to wean it out of them, or maybe even, like, you know, gauge based on behavior. That's something
Mm.
going on. So again, if you create that you know, connectivity initially, right? But hey, check in, let's do what we're gonna do, and ask a question or what's happening, or even if they don't respond, right, then there's your indicator, and you can go ahead and open that line of communication with your counselors. I know that you know, some teachers, you know, are a little finicky about, you know, how deep they want to dive into students' lives, but in reality, during this time, everybody still, you know, has a few skeletons in the closet that need to be addressed, or you know, they are still battling the COVID, you know, pandemic. You know, personable touch like we had back when, you know, the pandemic was fresh, keeping that in the classrooms definitely helped them with cope okay, with coping, or, it helps give them, a sense of security even, because this is all still very new.
You guys have given us so much. Y'all heard it here best, okay, from, the experts in the fields. I love just all the information, that y'all have provided. I think it's going to be so helpful, so useful for other teachers, educators out there, especially coping during this time, how best to cope, how to reach out, feel confident enough to reach out to your administration for support, different techniques and strategies that can be used in your classrooms. And as we wrap up, I want to, we already talked about, I think we could all attest to that this pandemic, this global pandemic has changed education as we all know it. You guys are experiencing it. You mentioned just the various ways that it has of just the technology, what you all have learned, just different skills, even the administration, the school itself, taking, being softer with students, not having that focus so much on standardized testing, which is what we've all known for the past decades, and just taking a newer approach to education as a whole. And so I love the direction it sounds like education is going towards. Still lots of improvement to be made, but I at least love just different strides that have been made, in certain schools. As we wrap this up, in one word, can you both describe what are you most hopeful for in this pandemic? We've talked about a lot of the highs and the lows, but and there have been many lows, as you all have been experiencing this almost 2 years. We don't know when it's going to end, but in one word, what are you most hopeful about?
I am hopeful that the needs of teachers will be a bit more prioritized than they have been before. And that grace that is expected for us to extend to our students and our parents, and the same compassion that is returned back to us, right? Because I cannot stress enough, we can't, what is it, Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Like, if we're not mentally there, we're not physically there, our basic needs aren't met, then how can we push for the meeting of the needs of our students, right? So just a bit more grace and compassion with the expectations. We are rolling back into the normal traditional school year. But it will never be back to normal because we're kind of making up for lost time, right? And, we still have to, deal with quarantines and, new students coming in and, their schedules are being changed. So it's the constant, okay, we're dealing with everything like on a rolling basis, on a rolling basis, on a rolling basis, on a rolling basis. At some point, I'm gonna stop rolling,
Right.
At some point, you have to just take a moment to just breathe, right? So it's, and I like that Jazz pointed to that. It reminded me of the teacher appreciation. Like my school, they did donuts, they did like a snow cone truck. So it was like those gestures, I really appreciated them. So just those things coming a bit more frequently to, let us as teachers know, okay, we understand that y'all can get a bit overwhelmed. So let me relieve a little bit off of you all. So I'm hopeful that more compassion and grace is extended to us. Especially because, we're going right back into those high stakes standardized testing. And those tests don't consider life or of the pandemic, right? So just more flexibility, in segueing and transitioning or pivoting rather back into, this lifestyle of testing. But keeping in mind, like, we're all still human. We need to be heard. We need to be seen. We need to be felt, right? In order for us to do our jobs effectively.
I love it. How about you, Jazz?
I would like for Teacher Appreciation Week to last for a month.
I concur.
I love it. Hey, y'all heard it here. So, okay, that's what we're pushing for. Teacher appreciation for 1 month. Let's make it happen. Oh, this has been an incredible conversation. Like, thank y'all so much for just taking the time to spread your knowledge, give strategies to other teachers that are out there, also dealing and coping with everything going on right now. And I'm hopeful for just everything that y'all have mentioned, and I honestly do see an amazing shift coming for education. And y'all should be proud of yourselves. Y'all made it almost 2 years through an entire pandemic. Like, clap it up for you. We'll catch y'all next time. We hope you've enjoyed this conversation as we talked about just how COVID-19 has impacted teachers and students, being told by our one and only amazing teachers on right now. Well, thank you, and we'll catch you again. Bye.